You know what I do when I pushed myself through a workout that was on schedule, but I didn't want to get started because I was tired?
Give yourself a big hug.
Yeah, just like,
Poker doesn't care. Poker has no sympathy for you. Poker doesn't give a shit. The events don't care. So you might as well not care as well. What's up, boys and girls? I'm here joined today by Simon Welsch. Simon is a poker performance coach, expertise in training, nutrition, sleep, and mindset, as I can read on the poster in his background if you're watching with us on YouTube. Mm-hmm. And I'm very excited to bring Simon on today and talk about some topics I think are very relevant to the poker world, such as burnout and dealing with stress and balancing being a high performance person with, finding some time to slow down and enjoy your life. So welcome, Simon, and, say hello to our audience.
Hi, James. Hello, audience. Thank you very much for having me today. I'm super grateful to talk about these topics today. Yeah, that's all I can say for now.
So I want to send a little shout out to Elliot Rowe for introducing us, although he doesn't even know that he did, because I believe he posted something of yours to his stories and I clicked on it because I thought it was intriguing. I'm like, oh, who's this guy? And I went to your page and I saw you doing cobras in front of your standing desk. Mm-hmm. And as someone who, like in one of your reels, it was a video of you doing like these stretches for the lower back in front of your desk and kind of like showing poker players the GTO stretches to use on their 5-minute break to avoid back pain. And as someone who recently suffered like a herniated disc and has been going to physiotherapy and, doing stretching at the recommendation of my therapist on my 5-minute breaks when I'm playing poker, this kind of thing, I was like, this seems like a guy I would like to talk to. And from there, we did a performance plan and we worked together for a little while. Mm-hmm. And recently you've brought some of your talents to my team, to Poker Spirit, and coaching some of our players on their performance and their lifestyle and their ergonomics at the desk and all these kind of things that seem unimportant until you hurt your back and you need your wife's help to get up from the couch. And then you're like, oh, crap, I really wish I would have paid attention to how I'm sitting at my table, 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Shout out to Elliot as well from my end. I was introduced to Elliot by my friend Fedor a couple of years ago, and I was very lucky to have a chance to have one session with him. And even though it was only one session, it had a really big impact on my life. And this is also part of the story of how I started working with poker players. Like, since my background is in sports science, I always, like, sports scientists look at training and they look at movement, and it's like, okay, we're just not looking left and right much. But since I've started working in the poker scene, I've realized that in terms of optimal health and performance, there's a lot of more things that we can learn. So there's nutrition that we can utilize. We can optimize our sleep. We can start building in healthy routines, and all of that translates to our health, but it also translates a lot to our poker performance. So when you look at literature or the scientific literature on all of these things, you can see a lot of the stuff that you do in terms of movement and also in terms of nutrition translates to you being able in concentrating better, which is truly amazing.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, I remember I went to an event in the US. It was like a speaker event. Brendan Bouchard was speaking. Tom Billio from Impact Theory was speaking. And Tom Billio was talking about his morning routine. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. I'm probably not. But super interesting guy. He's like, I think he's very, very wealthy. He's the founder of Quest Nutrition. He's a CEO. He's made a lot of money. He came from nothing, like had a really tough childhood, really interesting guy. And he's a very good balance of like, he's very tough, high performance, and at the same time, kind of does the other things like meditate and look after yourself. Like he's like not ignoring himself and ignoring like looking after your body, but he's definitely not one of these kind of, take it easy, don't worry, it's fine to be average types. Like he's a high level CEO, but he's also like, meditates and does this kind of thing. So he's someone I kind of admire a lot. And one of the things that he talked about was he said that in the morning every day, he does these two things like meditation and exercise. And, you hear different people. Some people say, don't exercise in the morning. Other people say, exercise in the morning, like do your hardest task first thing when you wake up. Don't look at your phone first hour. Don't do any work tasks. Different strategies work for different people. But the point that he made about the exercise specifically was like, when you move your brain produces this like brain derived nootropic factor. And it's like, if this was a drug, you would happily buy it. If this was a pill you could take, if this was a thing you could drink with your coffee, you would be like, give me more of that, because it clearly helps your performance. But the only way to get it is to move your body. So whenever you kind of encounter someone who, I don't know, for whatever reason, doesn't subscribe to exercise being a part of life for a mental athlete like a poker player, they're just wrong. It's just like, well, there's a chemical that your brain would like to produce that will help you perform better, and you're not going to get it by being sedentary. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it is super interesting. And even if it's like a small amount of exercise, your muscles will start producing BDNF. And as you said, if you would sell it like a drug, like insulin that is required for type 2 diabetics now, you could make it extremely expensive. And all you have to do is to start moving. It doesn't mean that you have to go to the gym every day. Maybe just a walk or like just jumping up a couple of stairs is what you need in order to get started. And I wonder why a lot of people neglect this. It's so important. And BDNF that is produced by our muscles can also be produced when we are in a ketogenic state, for example, which we get when we are fasting, which is, from an evolutionary perspective, extremely interesting when you look at it. When we had to fast 10 or 20,000 years ago, we started producing ketone bodies from fatty acids in our liver, which was good. It was amazing fuel for our brain. And the thing is, during that process, what you will also see is a rise in serum levels of BDNF. And that is, when you think about it, freaking cool, because when we were fasting, we had a high drive in order for us to get food. And evolution made us smarter during that time. So it helped us to become better at finding food. And we can still use these tools right now. But if we do the opposite, if we are sedentary, and if we eat all the time, we will not be able to produce BDNF.
That's interesting. So I guess when Gordon Gekko said lunch is for wimps, he was onto something.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I think it's kind of an interesting topic though. Because there's a lot of poker players, they're like intermittent fasting. Maybe they're doing like keto coffee. They're doing carnivore diet. They're trying everything to find like the edge. And I think that you can definitely go too far with it. Usually there's an 80-20, and 80% of the benefits of something can be gotten quite simply. And then trying to go the extra, many miles to pick up that little bit more is often, in my estimation, not worth it. I think if you want to leverage fasting in your life, for example, you can probably just do 16-8 and do black coffee and, eat your first meal later in the day and then have dinner and be totally fine. Doing longer fasts occasionally is interesting. And I've done them before. I think I've done like as many as 7 days before.
Wow, that's
and I've read Tim Ferriss's Tool of the Titans. He talks a lot about like the benefits for autophagy and like, these kind of like anti-cancer type of things from fasting. And I definitely think it's interesting. I think it's also very good for your willpower, and maybe not willpower is the right word, but your mental toughness. If you decide to be able to set an intention, I'm not going to eat for 36 hours or whatever. And then you just do it. You just follow it. It doesn't really matter if your body might be like, hey, I'm hungry. It's like, well, it doesn't matter. This is the decision we made, and being able to follow through on things that are difficult, I think is very important. And for people who've never done a fast before, who've never kind of exited the burning glucose for fuel state and landed in the burning ketosis for fuel state, they really don't understand the way that being on the sugar cycle can run your life. The way, like, once you live without food cravings, because 2 days into a fast, you're no longer hungry. And once you experience that, you kind of recognize why it might not be a good thing to start your day with a bowl of cereal, and then have a sandwich for lunch. But I kind of feel like if you're having no problems and your performance is great, you do you. But if you feel that eating makes you tired, which I certainly did, and I always found like Elon Musk said, if I could just drink something to ingest my calories for the day and not have to take the time out to eat, I would be more effective. And it really depends what you're optimizing for, but if you have a lot of goals, if you're CEO of a company or trying to be a high level poker player and you're trying to get that extra edge, I definitely think, doing something like a smoothie, like a protein shake with all your vitamins. I take Momentum Shake. Shout out to them. I think they're phenomenal. I take that as my fast breaker every day around the same time, and then have, 1 to 2 meals depending on how active I was in the afternoon. And it really, because it's same time every day, it's like GTO foods every day, besides the weekend, of course, as you know.
I know.
I feel that my performance is very consistent.
Yeah. And I think what you said in the beginning of when you started talking now, a lot of the stuff that we are doing comes with the 80%, or the 80% of the results come with 20% we get started with. So a lot of people, as you said, do these ketogenic states, do these fasts, they do their bulletproof coffee. By the end of the day, it's about starting in each area first, for example. So instead of going super extreme on the nutrition side, but never moving, okay, start thinking about having a workout program, and then think about what are the basics that I should have to do on the nutrition side as well. And as you said, everything comes in moderation. I think intermittent fasting, it's often used as a tool for losing weight. But on the other hand, I think it's an amazing tool to optimize your mental performance. And on the other hand, doing longer fasts, as Tim Ferriss also says, starts the process of autophagy. And this is, reducing inflammation. And it's also really good for your gut. But if I, as somebody who's working out 6 times a week or something, I do a 24-hour fast every Sunday, for example, I'm probably going to end up with too little calories. So there's tools that we can use for certain people. And I think intermittent fasting is a super interesting tool, especially when it comes to brain performance and you having mental energy throughout the day. But you have to apply it in the right context.
Reminds me of a funny story. I used to live in Budapest, and I remember a poker player that I lived with at the time. He would do intermittent fasting for like 2 days, and then he would go to our favorite Italian restaurant and just order like 3 desserts. So there's definitely a funny thing that happens if you don't like kind of set your intention properly. Like I found my intermittent fasting to be much more productive for my life when I would break my fast at the time I decided whether I was hungry or not, and just have like that shake that I talked about. Because I have a shake at 2 even though I'm not hungry. And I know there's like some health benefits or whatever to going a little bit longer, right? Like getting more into ketosis, like turning on some of those additional benefits. But at the same time, if I get to 6 or 7 p.m. and I didn't like break my fast yet because I really wasn't that hungry and I was just very busy and I was in flow of work, then I get a little bit unruly. If it's not going to be a longer fast, then I'm more likely to, make worse food choices when I do break my fast, or like, just overconsume or potentially just get into a headspace where I'm no longer having high performance because I'm actually like a little bit drained that I didn't consume any calories yet for the day.
Yeah, I believe the first meal you have throughout your day probably determines the best whether you are going to make better choices for the rest of the day. So if you have a bowl of cereal at 12, you are going to be craving some sugar 2 hours later for sure. Like there's no way around it. Like when I visit my mom, for example, and I'm German and we have some bread in the morning, I know that 2 hours later, I'm going to be craving something again. But then if I'm here in my work environment where I don't eat most of the time for the first 3 or 4 hours of my day, and I eat something conscious like some scrambled eggs with some vegetables and maybe some sourdough bread because I'm going to work out later, is I'm not going to be hungry for 4 hours. I just have another bout of full energy. I can go at a workout at 2 p.m. and I'm going to feel really, really good. And I can have a post-workout snack and then a dinner. So it all depends on how metabolically flexible you are. And you being able to work throughout the day without having food is a sign of metabolic flexibility. And what that means is your body is exactly what you were just talking about. It's capable of using different sources of energy for fuel. And that is a really good sign. What your buddy in Budapest did, he was causing stress through intermittent fasting. He was not already metabolically flexible. It stressed him out. It led to him releasing more cortisol. And there was only one response, which is like push in the food. And maybe don't start with 16-8, maybe start with 12-12 and then gradually build it up, because it's something that our body has to adapt to.
I remember he also got the keto flu. You know what this is? There's big Reddit threads about it. But basically, when people switch to doing a ketogenic diet for the first time, they often get like flu-like symptoms. And for me, I guess I'd done these longer fasts. So I'd switched from burning glucose for fuel to burning ketones for fuel. So I don't really notice it. You know, if I stop eating carbs, like I'm fine. I'm probably going to get hungry for carbs if I haven't had some in a while and I start working out, you know, and then I'm going to eat some, and it's simple. But for some people who've like always eaten carbs with every meal, when they first try to do a low carb diet, they get sick basically. Like they get like flu-like symptoms, you know, they're in bed, they have headache, this kind of thing. And I see a lot of guys like, you know, I'm doing a carnivore diet, I'm going to do this, I'm going to try this new thing. And they're not prepared for this. And I'm, you know, I struggle to relate because I think I started, you know, experimenting with this stuff so long ago. I don't remember if I ever experienced that. And definitely some people don't, but it is pretty common. And it's definitely throws a monkey wrench in the high performance plan when you suddenly have the keto flu.
Yeah, suddenly you want to be in a high performance state, but you're getting a flu because you're not eating carbs. And I would also say that cutting out carbs completely is for most people not the way to go, because yes, for the people who've been eating a lot of carbs throughout their life, they've become really good at using carbs for fuel, but they're probably not so good at using fat for fuel. Protein, you're not using so much of that for fuel. This is more about the amino acids having multiple tasks in our body. What I want to say is, for a high performer, they also want to get a good amount of sleep at night. And carbohydrates, for example, contrary what you hear outside a lot, are really good to help you fall asleep. So what I recommend to a lot of players, start easy, have a lower amount of carbohydrates with your first meal, but then if you're working out in the afternoon, add in some protein as well as some carbohydrates. And at night, for sure, have your sweet potatoes, have your rice, have your potatoes, because it's going to actually make you fall asleep better. And this way you can avoid it. If you constantly just go on to the fatty acid burning, then you might also impair your sleep. And this is probably what a lot of people struggle with as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think for me, it's very clear. I'm, you know, black coffee in the morning, shake with basically doesn't have carbs in the afternoon, and then like carbohydrate food toward the end of my day when I'm done with the mentally, like the big cognitive load for the day. I remember I used to find this challenging when I lived in Europe and I played poker until late in the evening, because often poker players in Europe are playing until 2-3 in the morning, whereas poker players in, you know, the US, Canada, Brazil, whatever, they're playing an earlier schedule. So for guys who play until late, you know, do they leave their food until after their session, or what do you recommend to those guys? Because we want to, you know, they may know that they shouldn't start their day with a big bowl of cereal, but at some point in their day, they're going to want to eat some carbs, but they're also maybe playing in the evening.
Yeah, I think in terms of optimal health and performance for the guys who are playing from Europe, don't play from Europe. Like that's my first recommendation. Like
I understand, but
yeah, it's not possible. I know, and I play my Sunday grinds as well. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, it's, you know, nice to be on a good circadian rhythm, and a lot of guys I know that do live in Europe, it tends to be kind of a foregone conclusion that eventually you will realize the night schedule is not worth it, even if there's more EV. It's not worth it to make more money if you need to stay up till 4:00 in the morning every day. And a lot of guys end up grinding the earlier schedule, even if they feel the EV is lower. But you know, depending on financial situation, depending on game availability, depending on where you're at in your life, there will always be guys grinding that late schedule. So for them, I guess it's just about doing your workout in the morning, following it up with your carbohydrate rich meal, and then, you know, maybe having a lull in the middle of your day where you do some kind of like watching videos, some sort of like incredibly intense work. And then later in the day, starting a session and maybe having your shake or whatever and your high protein, low carb meal as your snack during your session.
Yeah, that sounds like a plan. What I always start with there is try to have your circadian rhythm not having too much fluctuation. So if you know Sunday grind is going to be long, but you are going to have to get up Monday morning at 8 a.m. again, that's probably not the way to go. Maybe start a little bit earlier, first of all. And then if you are one of the guys who's playing until very late or very early in the morning, then try to have the rest of your week look somewhat similar, that these deviations in terms of when you go to bed or when you wake up in the morning are not too large. Otherwise, you're also going to lack energy if you're playing like the final table at 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. when you are playing against the guys from Brazil or Canada who still have energy because, I don't know, it's 10 p.m. or something like that. In terms of nutrition, so if you can sleep in a little bit on your Sunday, for example, I think this is really good. I think the Sundays are also not the days for the hardest workouts. So when I schedule workouts or trainings for my players, mostly the Sunday is either a free day or just like an easy movement / yoga mobility kind of day, because I don't want them to be too exhausted before they start their Sunday session. If they instead would do a longer high intensity training or some strength training, that might actually impair their performance. What I tend to go is then having a light meal, but also one that also contains carbohydrates already to get them fueled with energy, so they have more energy throughout their session. Problem that I see with a lot of players is them snacking every 5-minute break. And when I tell them, okay, this is actually not giving you energy, this is draining your energy in the long run, this is where the 5-minute active breaks actually come in. And when I tell them, okay, maybe have one light snack, maybe later in the day, or maybe later in the night, that restores some of that energy that you needed. And for a lot of the guys, I recommend then having not dinner, or you can't even call it dinner, like just not eating when you finish your session. Maybe do some progressive muscle relaxation to relax, and then give your body a chance to get into the recovery zone.
What do you think about the tilt meal as a cool down?
What is a tilt meal?
When you have a really tilting session and then you eat something and you feel better. Generally not some GTO food.
I mean, it works, right? That's why a lot of people crave sugar and all these highly palatable foods. Like, it lets you increase your serotonin release. It makes you happy. But I think there is a problem with that, because there's probably some bigger underlying emotion that you better have to deal with instead of like trying to eat it out.
You never self-regulated with gummy bears?
I try to not. And I also try to not drink alcohol for self-regulation. But I mean, people have their coping strategies and some of them are not very optimal. And I think as long as you start reducing these negative coping strategies, like having a really bad meal or doing drugs, for example, I think you're on a good way.
Yeah. I think it's important, like, to understand that, like, well, improvement is always the goal. Like, you're never going to be perfect. Then if you catch yourself, I don't know, having a slightly suboptimal coping strategy, it's, as James Clear says in Atomic Habits, right? Every action is a vote for the type of person you want to be. Mm-hmm. However, that doesn't mean that you're going to be exactly the type of person you want to be every day, every moment, forever. You know, like, there's going to be moments where in that moment don't have it to make the most optimal decision. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of okay. You know, I think it's important to be able to give yourself grace, you know, just like a poker graph. Often results in personal development aren't a straight line just up. There's ups and downs, you know, mm-hmm. And sometimes you need to give yourself a break, especially if you've been kind of over striving, you know, mm-hmm. maybe taking the right actions, but with too much urgency, perfectionism, overbearingness on yourself. And that's something I think a lot of guys struggle to figure out. You know, they're doing all the right things. They're reading all the right books. They're listening to the right podcasts. But there is just this kind of little thing inside to do with their relationship to themselves and the pressure they're putting on themselves to do these things, and the lack of gratitude toward themselves for their progress, and the critical nature of their observations of everything they've done poorly. And I think that can be one of the psychological factors that can lead to burnout, which is definitely a topic that I wanted to get into a little bit today, because I feel that this is one the poker world, in my estimation, still very highly fails to solve. It's always been a topic that's come up, and it's almost like the better the player I work with, the more likely they've experienced burnout or experience it quite often. And it's one of the things that when you adjust it, not only does it add so much value to your EV, but to your happiness, because burnout follows a cycle of like depression and lack of ability to get up and do stuff, and which leads to further self-loathing. And it just becomes this kind of horrible cycle that it really detracts from a person's happiness when they're not at the peak of the wave. So you said some really interesting things about the physiology of how that cycle happens in the call that you did for the Poker Spirit team last week. And I was curious if you could expand upon that for the listeners of the podcast.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, burnout is a super interesting topic. We've seen it come up in the business world throughout the last 10, 20, 30 years. And I think it's something that translates to a lot of high performance, but also a lot of people from the real world who just have too many hats on in terms of family and business. But I mean, poker is right next door. Like this is where it's super easy to get into burnout. One of the reasons for that is the super long feedback loop that there is in poker. Like, especially if you're a tournament player, like if you have a 20% return on investment on average in your tournaments, for example, the feedback loop until you actually see some real results in terms of your graph can be super long. So this is one of the biggest challenges. Another thing is there's a big fear of missing out because there's always a tournament running. You can fly to Vegas to WSOP and then straight to Florida. Then there's W Group, then there's Scoop, then there's GG Summer Festival. Like all of these things are happening and there's no break at all. This is why a lot of poker players start and keep on playing. And at the same time, there's infinite content to study and infinite ways of improving your game. So it's on the one hand really interesting, but you have to manage it. And how burnout actually starts, we have to look at how stress is actually perceived, because burnout is the cause of you having chronic stress and not having any coping strategies. In order for us to understand this a little bit better, and please interrupt me if I'm talking too long now, but you asked me for it, we need to look at evolution and how stress actually works. And stress is, when we look at it, how it happened 20, 30, or 10,000 years ago, is something that happened very acutely. We were under stress because we had to find food, so we had to hunt. Our body was starting to produce cortisol because we perceived stress in our brain, and a hormone was then put towards our adrenal glands, which then released cortisol, which lets us drive throughout the day and also rises our blood sugar, which was fine. We were searching for food and hopefully we were finding something, or we had a fight with another tribe, for example, and hopefully we were winning. But then we had also what is called parasympathetic activity again. We were able to be around other people. We were able to cool down. And now also in the poker world, we have quite the opposite. We have a constant stress because we put ourselves under a lot of pressure. And one important thing to mention here, the stress is never connected to movement. So what we were seeing back in the day, a couple of 10,000 years ago, was stress was not something that was happening in our mind only. Like we didn't have any financial problems. We still had probably relationships problems, of course, but more on the cognitive side is happening right now. And it is happening when we are sitting in front of our computers and playing poker. The vicious cycle here is that if you don't have this feedback loop, you always have this high levels of cortisol, and your adrenal glands keep on producing that cortisol until your cells that are supposed to receive the cortisol and get the message become cortisol resistant until cortisol is being produced even more and more. So there is no negative feedback loop anymore until we burn out. And this is where people outside of the poker world or also in the poker world can't get out of bed anymore. They have a huge lack of energy. They lose their jobs and they don't know what to do anymore. They can't go to the gym. They have issues falling asleep. And this is what I've also realized happens with a lot of poker players and also throughout the time that I worked with poker players.
So cortisol, like for our listeners who may not be, have a background in biology. I mean, the first time I learned about cortisol, I think was when I was going to the gym in university and you're reading a bunch of bro science about lifting weights. And it was like, well, after 45 minutes, your body starts to produce quite a lot of cortisol and you should end your workout maximum 60 or 70 minutes, but ideally like 45 minutes after you start lifting, because there'll be like more cortisol in your muscles and you're not going to, you're not going to be able to perform as well. And then, more recently, I started to learn that cortisol is the stress hormone that gets you up in the morning. And that was like my second introduction to understanding the role of cortisol in my daily life. Recently, I learned that if you take cortisol, when you wake up, you have the spike of cortisol, and that already gives you energy. And instead of going for a coffee first thing in the morning, when you kind of double having your caffeine and your cortisol, that leads to the crash if 3 hours go by, because now the cortisol spike is over and the caffeine spike is over. Instead, take your cortisol spike, exit the building, go outside, get some sunlight in your eyeballs, and then come back inside after getting some sun. First 90 minutes of the day, don't have caffeine. And as that natural cortisol spike starts to go down, that's when you caffeinate, and you're going to avoid that mid-morning crash. And I started doing that. And I think this is something I heard from Huberman, but it's super effective. Like, I would never go back. And if I do find myself in a cycle where I'm just don't have time, I wake up, I need to be somewhere, I want to have a coffee first, and I start closing that gap between when I wake up and when I caffeinate. As that gap gets smaller and smaller, my midday energy levels feel the repercussion of that. So kind of understanding the role of cortisol in your life. To be honest, I still don't quite see how these are the same thing, the thing that builds up in my muscles when I exercise and the thing that gets me out of bed in the morning. But what you said in our presentation that I thought was super interesting was you talked about this idea of cortisol resistance, similar to like insulin resistance. And that's something I never heard before. So perhaps you could explain that piece for the listeners, and anything else you want to use to paint the picture of how cortisol is important to us and we should stop neglecting it.
Yeah. So when you think about what you just described is having this physiological curve of cortisol in the morning. It's called the cortisol awakening response. It starts basically before or when we wake up, and then it goes up for maybe 60, 90, or 100 minutes. Like, this is how humans are supposed to wake up. If you are listening to somebody who says, oh, I didn't have my coffee yet, I can't. Okay, they are relying on the coffee because they can't get up without the coffee. What we are aiming for instead is having this cortisol waking us up. And also, on the other hand, if you look at the counterpart, if cortisol is still high at night because you're playing a stressful final table, then you are impairing your probability or your capability of producing melatonin. So it will also impair your sleep. Cortisol is also being released when we work out, of course, and it's supposed to elevate our blood sugar because we need energy. A stress response basically is a response from our body to take up energy, because we need energy because it was always connected to movement. We needed to hunt or we needed to fight, and therefore the blood sugar goes up. We also start taking in glucose and salt as well as water from our intestines into the blood, and our thyroid is being activated. So the hormone that is related to how we use energy in the body. Now, let's stop the biology a little bit here. Cortisol resistance is a similar mechanism as insulin resistance. So when we look at type 2 diabetics, for example, what it starts with is you eat frequently, you are not moving enough, and you're eating a high amount of carbohydrates, especially with a high glycemic index. Every time we eat something, especially that is high in carbohydrates, we release that insulin that we need in order to take up glucose into our cells. If we keep on doing that, and we're not moving enough, our cells lose the sensibility to take up this glucose and to be responding towards this insulin. So the feedback loop, and this is the same when it comes to cortisol and chronic stress, is we produce more insulin, and we get what is called hyperinsulinemia. And the same is called hypercortisolemia when it comes to chronic stress. And this happens, or this works, until those cells that are producing either insulin or cortisol cannot produce it anymore. You see that the feedback loop that is supposed to be there, okay, insulin is working, the blood sugar is going down, and the cells can take up the energy, is not there anymore. And then the brain is repeating this negative loop. And in insulin, when it comes to insulin, the response will then be we produce insulin until we can't. And this is when the cells of the pancreas are dying, and then we are relying on insulin. And the same is the thing with cortisol. We have chronic stress. We become cortisol resistant because there is no negative feedback loop anymore. And we have no opportunity to become less stressed. We're not moving, we're not social, we're not taking any off days, which are crucial. Our adrenal glands will keep on firing until they can't fire. And then we have the lack of energy. And that's what we call burnout, which is still often talked about in the context as being a psychological issue. But when you understand how stress responses work, you also understand this has nothing to do with psychology. Yes, there's stress that starts in the brain, but it ends as a physiological and then pathological response in our bodies.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And I find that one of the things I observe a lot is you encounter a lot of people who try to solve everything mentally or everything physiologically. And if you don't recognize that the stress that starts in your mind affects your body and the actions you take for your body can reduce the stress you feel in your mind, you will just run in circles and make very little progress. I remember I was guilty of being someone who always tried to solve things mentally. And one of the things I found was that regulating my breathing solved like 80% of my problems. And it's kind of crazy. But once I learned to breathe more deeply and like not have this shallow chest breath and just calm my body, a lot of things I was stressed about seemed like very not a big deal. Like if your body feels like everything is fine, your mind is kind of like chill and it's like, yeah, things are fine. But if your body is like hyperventilating, like everything in your mind is like, oh my God, I'm good. You know, like the quality of your thoughts is like the quality of your consciousness is kind of dependent on the state of your nervous system. And the state of your consciousness can influence the state of your nervous system. It's like this feedback loop between the mind and the body. And if you often the solution is to solve it with the other one. Like when you're really in your head, go for a walk, get out of the house. You know, when you're, I don't know if it works the other direction. I'd have to think about that. But, you know, if you're, it could, because if you're carrying a lot of tension in your body, right? You can go to like the chiropractor or whatever. You can do stretching to try and exercise to relieve the tension. But you could also start to meditate, start to have some exercises you do mentally to shut down your day and try to stop manifesting all your mental stress into your body by like learning some strategies for dealing with it.
Yeah, I highly agree. There's in medical world, there's this term called psychosomatics. So basically the connection of the brain, the psyche and the body. And I wonder why they invented this term, because like obviously your brain is part of your body and your body is connected to your brain, and the one thing will have an impact on another one. So for example, maybe another example one could make here, if I just did an Olympic distance triathlon, for example, that also has an influence on my nervous system. Like when I did my first Olympic distance, which is not super long, but for me, it was a competition of 2.5 to 2 hours 45. I was in a stressed mode for the whole night. I was like, my body had this really strong stress response. And it was super tough to me cool down. So here I could have used my brain instead to calm myself down. I could have done some yoga nidra. I could have done some progressive muscle relaxation, which is a technique that involves both the body and the brain. Or I could have just done some easy meditation or some breathing. That would have helped me. And this also, as we know now, meditation, for example, also reduces inflammation. There's more and more research coming out that we can also alter the effects of mindfulness practice towards inflammation, which I believe is amazing.
Meditation is the thing that was already on my list of if this was a drug, you would take it every day, you would buy it at any price. So I'm always kind of amazed when people are seemingly not interested in doing the things that, like, if this was a drug, you'd be, you know, buying it in bulk. You know, meditation, exercise, sleeping on a, you know, decent rhythm. All of these things are so obvious, but like people want to find the high level advanced solution while not tying their shoes. You know what I mean? Honestly, kind of troubling, but I get it, because common sense is often not common practice. And I think I could probably divulge on that for a long time. But there's interesting things about this cortisol cycle that kind of draw some parallels for me. So for example, with any kind of stimulant, right? Like caffeine, any other stimulants, if a person uses them too much, they grow a tolerance and they become ineffective. And now you're needing more and more of the same stimulant that you took before to get less and less of a result. And, you know, this is like in many ways the problem with like ADHD drugs. I mean, one of the many problems, but, you know, people become reliant on a certain cocktail of chemicals in their system to get things done. And then if they need that level, and the level they need is growing higher, and the amount that they're taking isn't getting it done, and then without that, they're ineffective. And in a sense, cortisol is just another, you know, kind of chemical in the brain like that gets you going. And if you live in a chronic state of stress, it's sort of like being on a coffee IV 24/7. It's not going to wake you up anymore because you just live in a state of coffee. You know, it's not going to do anything, but if you don't drink it, you're going to feel bad. But you just, you know, on this drip of coffee, you're not like, ooh, I had a coffee. Whereas like it's kind of the similar with cortisol. If you're just living in stress 24/7, you don't feel that spike like, oh, it's time to get up, because I felt stressed before I woke up. I felt stressed after I woke up. I felt stressed every moment of my day. So I didn't have any boost. You know what I mean? Yeah. And many things we become tolerant to if we overdo it. And stress is not very fun. So probably we don't want to overdo it.
I agree. And I think it all comes down to a big part of your relationship towards poker and your professional life as well. And also, how much do you enjoy life when you're in a constant state of stress, and how much can you be consciously aware when you are in a constant state of stress? So, for example, what I do on my day, basically, I'm not a huge morning routine guy. Like I don't take 1 hour or something. Like I am mindful in the morning. I do my mindfulness practice in the morning, and then I go outside, view some sunlight. Right now I'm doing it outside on the balcony in the morning, which is like 0 degrees Celsius already. So I put on my hoodie and I'm just out there, and the sun is like, the balcony is headed right towards east, and the sun is coming straight into my eyes. And it's really amazing conscious start into the morning. But then I drink some water and I will usually start to work. But throughout the day, I'm not in a constant state of stress. I work in 90-minute sprints, for example, which is going to be tough for a tournament player. But then I take breaks in between where I consciously take time to eat my food, where I'm relaxed, or I just go out for like a 20-minute walk or something. And this, on the one hand, it helps me to enjoy the process quite a bit. I know tournament players will not get that chance, but they have to work their way around it. But if you're just pushing through the whole week, you're just constantly working, you're just constantly playing, but you never get the time to enjoy it. Like, what are you playing poker for? Poker, a lot of people, I believe, are playing to have the freedom, to get financial freedom, and then enjoy life. But if you keep on going and keep on going, because you're maybe unhappy with yourself, or you have this high performance mindset, and you never take breaks, you are going to run into something. And what you are working for is not going to be there, I believe.
Yeah. I find that a lot of people would probably be in a better state in their life if they traded their fear of missing out for the FOMO, for the JOCO, the joy of chilling out.
I agree. I'm a big, like, I grew up with a mom very conscious, and she always taught me to be very safe. And so what I learned from her was taking breaks is really, really important. And I think a lot of people in the poker world are not taking enough breaks. Like, it's super crucial to have that one day just for yourself throughout the week, where you do whatever you want to do. And if that's studying 1 hour of poker and then watching some football, that's cool. But this break throughout the week gives you a chance to recover. It helps you to be conscious and then show up with energy the next day again. I think it's super important.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the most important things to do is, most people, they put the work they feel like they need to do on their schedule first. And then like the leftover time is free time, and they work themselves to the bone. And when it comes to the free time, they don't have the like ability to enjoy it. You know, they can spend hours on their phone scrolling Instagram, and they don't enjoy doing that. They're just, their body has quit. So that's all they're really capable for, because they push themselves so far. And just this like kind of ability to take a step back and say, okay, I'm going to work till 3. And at 3 o'clock, even if I feel like I can keep going, I'm going to go for a 30-minute walk. I'm going to listen to an audiobook. I'm going to, I did this yesterday. I went to the beach with my dog. I met my friend and his dog, walked around for an hour between 4 and 5 o'clock, came back, did 3 more hours of work. Both I experienced for myself that I felt like if I had continued working straight through, which I, often do, I know my performance would have started to like rapidly decline. I was already kind of in that mode where I'm switching between messages on Discord and Telegram and switching between tasks, but not really operating at a high level. And once I went for my walk and I came back and took an hour off of work, I was back to like, okay, high level, high level cognition, high level efficiency in getting things done. And my friend actually texted me and said, hey man, that walk was amazing for me. Like I went back, I like crushed my work. I really needed that reset. And it's kind of once you start to do it, once you start putting that day off on your calendar, like Saturday, no poker, day off, you start putting the cap on when you're going to finish work for the day. You start to actually value the time in between more and use it more efficiently, because a lot of people are working around the clock, doing loads of urgent, unimportant things, feeling exhausted, feeling miserable, feeling stressed, not enjoying their life, and thinking, I need to succeed first. And the thing is, when you just start to put the blocks for you to recover on your schedule and follow them, which is very hard for high performance people who haven't yet reached their current goal, which, let's be honest, is everybody, because everyone has a current goal. It's really hard for people to realize that taking time to chill out, taking time to relax, even if you're meditating, it's not because meditation's on my to-do list. It's because you like generally want to sit down and just chill for a minute, taking time to do things in a different approach than getting things done is so important for the recovery. And if you don't recover, you won't perform. And guys they can't get it through their head sometimes, it's very, but once you get it, you're like, I almost lived my whole life wrong.
Yeah, I can truly understand it. And it's something that I've learned throughout the time. I've been starting to go self-employed now, which happened now 5 months ago. And there's always something I can do. There's always this Instagram post to make. There's always that. There's always whatever, right? I could work all day, but I'm a big proponent at just trying to enjoy the process and also being fine with just being. I think that is super important. And it's something that we can learn from the sports world as well, where it's work out hard and recover even harder. Like this is super important. Like there you prioritize sleep, you prioritize the off days. There you have a schedule where off days are built in, or where at least days are where there's lower training volume or lower training intensity. And you also work in blocks. You're tapering before the competition to fill up the storages again and be there at 100%. And if you don't learn to take these breaks, you are always draining the energy until there's no energy left. And I couldn't agree more with you. Like, I'd rather work 4 hours a day, every day, than working from Monday till Friday, let's say from 8 until 6, because then on Saturday, on Sunday, I will only be lying on the couch, like feeling miserable because 5 days in a row I've just been working. So I'd rather enjoy the day or the moment itself, be very, let's say hyper-focused when I'm working in the morning and when I have my meetings in the afternoon, and then have time for myself, cook something with my girlfriend, go out for a bike ride, do the laundry, and just be totally fine with just doing the laundry. I think this is something that is extremely important and underrated.
It brings a couple of quotes to mind that are more the contemplative side. If you can't be happy with a coffee, you won't be happy with a Ferrari. Have you heard this one before?
I didn't hear it.
As you were talking about your laundry, I thought to myself, before enlightenment, you wash the dishes. After enlightenment, you wash the dishes. I think that people, you're always going to have a thing you're striving for. So if your mental strategy, which is often a default for most people and something they've never really even thought about, is to live in a way that doesn't make you happy until you reach said goal, you will live your entire life in a way that doesn't make you happy. Because when you reach said goal, you will invariably find out that your goal didn't make you happy. I've talked to very successful poker players after 7-figure scores, and some of them have never been more depressed because they got the thing they thought was going to be the thing, and they realized there is no thing. Like, if you're not happy now and you don't think you can fix it now, you can never fix it. If you can't be happy with nothing, you won't be happy with everything. You'll be worse because you'll say, oh my God, I tried all the things and none of the things are the thing. There is no thing. What do I do? And the thing is inside of you. You already know how to be happy, even if you're on a downswing. And if you can, that's one of the blessings a downswing can teach you. And it's one of the character developments that can come from poker is if you can realize that you're in control of your experience of life, even though you're not in control of what happens to you, even though you can run so far under EV for so long and it's so not fair, but you can still learn to wake up with a smile. You can still find the inspiration in yourself. Well, then you got the game beat. You've already won. Yeah. And a lot of guys who live in striving, they never win, you know, there are plenty of well-off, wealthy, very unhappy people in this world, you know, and if you only need to turn on politics for about a half a second to see that in droves, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. Like a good exercise, maybe that I always recommend to players is doing, I don't think you have to do something like a gratefulness diary, but just taking some time for yourself and be happy and be conscious about what you already have. And most importantly, for who you be. Like a big challenge that I see a lot of guys have is, are they able to give themselves a hug? Are they able to give themselves like a freaking high five when they finish their workout, or that they're just happy that they got out of bed? And also reflecting on the past couple of weeks, like, okay, you can strive, you can look forward, but sometimes it's also in order to just love yourself, to look back and see what you've done for yourself, look at the workouts you've done, look at the study you've put in. And if you never take the time to reflect on where you've been and also what you've done, like, and also at the same time have the ability to just like be fine with the moment, as you said, like just being able to enjoy the coffee, I think you are missing out something. And I think, yes, in order to achieve something, you have to do something. Like hard work is what you have to do, but it's also about balancing your life and enjoying the process. I couldn't agree more with you.
I think it's possible to work incredibly hard and do the work that's required and realize that the work is play, as Alan Watts would say. You know, if you are a poker player and you have to force yourself to study, you either need to find the curiosity in the game or find a new career path. It really is that simple. You're never going to be a great poker player if you hate the work. You know, it's just can't happen. You can maybe survive for a while, you know, but eventually, like if you can't connect enthusiasm and curiosity to your daily life, you're just going to get massively outperformed by the people who aren't counting down the time till they can stop. You know, the people who they just care enough. Like, you know, calling back to one of the legends of poker, Patrick Leonard, he did the overnight schedule. You know, he lived in Europe and he would stay up every night until a certain time in the morning. Even if he didn't have any runs, he would just stay up and study so that his mind was in the practice of being awake and thinking about poker until whatever it was, 6 or 7 in the morning. So when he did have a deep run at the final table, he's not tired. And he wanted to do that. You know, he didn't force himself to do that because technically it's GTO to be awake at 7 a.m. He stayed up because he cared that much about being a great poker player. And he didn't want to go to bed until he'd reviewed all the hands from the session. That's an incredible sacrifice to make. But it's a lot easier of a sacrifice to make when you really want to make it. And if you're forcing yourself to do stuff you really don't want to do because you think you have to, you know, you might be on the wrong track.
Yeah, I really agree. And there's one paper that I also showed in the call on Monday that basically stated, it looked at different types of poker players and also looked at correlations between their mental state of well-being and also happiness in comparison to their attitude towards poker. And what has been shown here, the people who were the happiest, or the players who were the happiest, they have had a more harmonious and curious approach towards the game. So they were very curious about learning more and exploiting, and they were not chasing the results. Like the results is what we really can't influence. Yes, we can influence them in a decade or maybe in 20 years if we're trying to play tournament players. But what's super interesting, the people felt a lot better who were curious about the game. And I think Patrick Leonard, then, I didn't hear that story, but I think he was doing a great job then, because it's better to have this more constant rhythm than going back and forth. And that's why he committed to it. And he probably enjoyed it, although it was hard at times, I can imagine.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I'm sure it still felt like a sacrifice for him. I mean, sometimes you got to do the work and it's not fun. That is true. And like being able to be disciplined to do that is an important skill to develop. I just don't think you can be forcing yourself as a habit, you know? Maybe some days you got to You got to do it regardless of how you feel about it. That's what being a professional is. But in the long run, you want to get your inspiration, your enthusiasm in sync with the work that needs to be done. That's going to be the most effective strategy, because the work doesn't care. The work doesn't care if you feel like doing it or not. It's the work that's required to be good enough to get the results that you want. So the work needs to be done. And it's also much harder to absorb the work if you're in a state of resistance. If you're doing the work begrudgingly, you're doing the work because you put it on your schedule and you feel like you have to, but you don't really, you're not really working with curiosity. You're not going to retain the information. You're not going to make the connections. If you're, it's like going to a party you didn't want to go to and then trying to be social. It's not going to go over so well. It's when you're really excited to like go out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I really like that analogy. And what happens with players is when they put too much on their plate, like let's say they work until 8 p.m. at night, and then they have the next deep work or study slot right the next morning. And that's also something that I resonate with. I'm not curious. I'm not interested in my work as much when the preceding day, for example, was just too long and I was pushing myself. And that's exactly what you've said a couple of minutes ago. I'd rather stop at 4 or 5 and then have time to recover until my mental energy is restored and I get back to it in the morning. And then deep work also is easier, right? Then that's where studying becomes easier, where you have the mental energy because you've given yourself a break and you've done something good for you. And now you can put in the work again. And there's times, as I said, for hard work, there's weeks that are harder than others where you push a little bit more. But the key is here to listen to your body and also to your brain, what it's telling you, and think about whether it makes sense to take a step back or just maybe take a day off instead of like just pushing through. And this is where a lot of the professionals, I believe, just keep on pushing and keep on pushing, where it would be so much higher in terms of EV if they just took a step back, half a day or a day off, and then starting with new energy on the next week, for example.
One of the things I think people struggle with as well, and one of the things I've struggled with is you get to the end of your day, right? And I call it like being wired and tired. You've been playing a long poker session or doing some work till kind of late, and your brain is in think mode, but your body is in, come on, guy, let's go to bed mode, and it's like body asleep, mind awake, but not really in a good way. And one of the things I put into my course was an explanation about brainwave states and how, like, when we're, working and playing poker, for example, we're in a beta state. And this is like a certain level of like chemistry in the brain, like the waves actually going through our brain are a certain frequency that helps us think in a certain kind of way. Whereas like when you're asleep, you're in like a delta or a theta state, depending on how deep your sleep is. And for example, REM sleep is when we actually memorize, like store to our solid drive instead of the RAM in our mind, the things we've been learning. So poker players who overwork and undersleep, they're not going to retain the information. It's like when you stay up all night in college cramming for a test and then you take the test and then forget everything the next day. Like, you need to be recovering. And one of the ways you get into deep sleep is by bringing your brainwave states down to the theta state where they can actually, or the delta state where they can actually access these deeper waves of sleep. So for me, like binaural beats helps me a lot. Like if I know that I'm in that like wired and tired state, for me, the first thing is to identify it. Like I'm on my phone, I'm doing nothing. I know it's time to go to bed, but like there's just this resistance to being still, to not having a thing to put my attention on. So then it's like, put on the headphones, put on the binaural beats, the calming music, close the eyes, put on the sleep mask, turn on the air conditioning, like whatever it is. Try to not allow yourself to continue feeding into more beta brainwave activities, more, scrolling or more, checking something on Twitter. Like all of these things are kind of toxic in that moment because your brain is not in the state it needs to be in for you to sleep. And if you continue to do the things your brain wants to do based on the state it's in, you're going to continue to stay in that state. Whereas if you put on Andrew Huberman, like non-sleep deep rest track from YouTube, or you put on a yoga nidra from like whatever meditation app you use, these things are actual techniques of using your focus and your breath and your attention to bring your mind into the state where it can relax for sleep. The struggling point, the thing that I think is the hardest, is just having the discipline to do that. It's like your car is in fifth gear and you need to stop. and like the car doesn't want to stop because it's moving. Like an object in motion will stay in motion. Your brain is in hyperdrive and you need to slow it down, but it doesn't want to slow down. And that is, I think, one of the biggest challenges of being a poker player, to be honest.
I highly agree. And especially for the guys in Europe who disrupt their sleep, I think it's going to be super important for them. I think we can look at the nervous system, and we see, especially if we play a final table, for example, that yes, we want to be in a balance between sympathetic and parasympathetic activities. On the one hand, we don't want to be in a stressed mode, and the other hand, we also don't want to fall asleep. We want the limbic system, which is regulating this, to be somewhat calm and have our brain being able there to perform. But if you said you are just keeping going, and if you stay in the state where you are looking for problem solutions, one of the easiest ways to do it is, I believe, with progressive muscle relaxation, because it's a really amazing tool that connects the function or just tensing your muscles while relaxing your muscles back to your breath. So it's a tool that combines, just putting on, tensing the muscles while inhaling, and then just consciously letting go and becoming more aware of it again. And some of these tools are on some of the tapes that you can use there on like 5 or 7 minutes. And I think they have an amazing impact. I think Yoga Nidra is amazing. I like it a lot, but connecting, it's something that I do more in the afternoon when I want to restore some energy in order for me to, I don't know, play a short cash game session or have an important meeting or something like that. But progressive muscle relaxation really helps with connecting the body to the brain again and becoming more aware. And therefore, it's a great tool that I often use or often recommend to players who want to cool down. The biggest challenge is doing it. Like when you're tired at night and you just want to go to bed, and you just cashed a bad beat and somebody did something with you, you got up late or whatever. It's tough to just press the start button, right? Like it's tough to just get started. Once you're there, once you start putting away your phone and get started, like then the process is going, and then you actually made that one. So maybe it's a good idea to just think about it. Okay, this one little win, the last win of the day that I have to do, will give me incredible results. It will be determining whether I will be able to fall asleep, whether I will have good memory of what I've learned today, whether I give my body a good chance to recover, and whether I'm having energy the next morning. So maybe you can reframe it for yourself. Okay, good. I worked a ton today. I made a lot, but this 1% is going to have such a huge impact on how I'm going to feel the next day. And maybe this type of reframing will give you a good chance of doing exactly that.
Yeah. I mean, I've got a bunch of techniques that kind of alternate before, and they all sort of follow that ethos. It's another example of like delayed gratification being the key to success, but it's just humans are kind of wired to do what feels the best in the moment, which is, in this sense, to continue being wired and tired and like, letting your mind go down these rabbit holes. So, one technique that I found is very effective is if you want to make a cool down habit and you want to make something like yoga nidra, progressive muscle relaxation a part of your habit, just make an incentive. If I don't do it, I owe my backer, $1,000. Now all of a sudden I get paid $1,000 to yoga nidra. I'm going to do it. That's worked for me. I meditated for like 3 months in a row without missing a day by just saying I would give someone $1,000 if I didn't do it. It's very effective. It's stupid, but it's very effective. Another thing that's helped me, for example, it's just thinking about like what kind of person I want to be in front of the people who will see that. Like, do I want to be the kind of person who's in the bed on my phone, like scrolling Twitter at night in front of my wife? Or do I want to be the kind of person who, comes into the room, like relaxes and goes to bed like a man, And when I have kids, what kind of example do I want to set for them? And I think that's even more important. So for the guys who are like, settled with a partner or having a family already or getting close to, I think, being that conscious leader of your family is a very strong motivation to, not be a little boy and not be on your phone and like, playing the dopamine game. As you said, in the morning, like what kind of a morning do I want to have? That's another big one. You're choosing unhappiness when you choose to stay up on a device instead of doing a relaxation technique and going to sleep, because then in the morning it's like, you're just like living a less functional life than you're capable of. Eventually you have to start choosing the decision to make you happy, right? That's kind of why I say very often that delayed gratification is the key to success. But then we also say very often that common sense isn't common practice. This is the pivotal moment, the moment where it's like, I know what I should do, I know it's good for me, but my brain is a monkey. Yeah, and that's the challenge.
And it's tough. And I think thinking about the persons who are thinking about us or who we want to kind of be a good role model for is one way to start. But also what I also like then is whenever I see myself scrolling or just not getting out of a cycle that I don't want to be in, a good way is to take the outside view. Maybe something that we learned from deeper techniques of meditation or mindfulness. Just like, imagine Simon standing right there next to you and looking at you and like, oh my, holy shit, what is this guy doing? Like, why is he not getting up and doing some stretching and starting to make dinner? Like, and this also gives me as well a good chance to just break that cycle. And being a good role model, I think it's really, really important. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, it's interesting. You can sort of depersonalize it. It's like, here is a human, experiencing a state of heightened mental arousal and using a maladaptive coping strategy, like silly human. And then it's like, I'm not personally failing. I don't need to, because if you go into shame, right? If you start to feel bad about yourself, well, shame is the most disempowering state you can be in. So the moment you're acting suboptimal and feeling ashamed about it, you won't have the personal power to get out of that state. So kind of in that moment, by depersonalizing it, you can just kind of interject logic and say, okay, what should poor human who is doing their maladaptive strategy do instead? And it's very obvious, like, oh, humans should, put down perpetuating the cycle and make a vote for the person they want to be. And then you're like, okay, go. And it's easy. I was just going to say, like, in our team, one of our players who's recently on a phenomenal upswing, actually, he's won like 24K at 1-2 and 2-4 in the last few weeks. So he read this book, The 5-Second Rule. You've probably heard of it, right? I mean, I never read the book, but I know what the rule is, right? It's just this cognitive technique that whenever there's something you need to do, you count backwards from 5 and then you just do it. And it's kind of stupid because but it's kind of cool. If you do it and you make a streak out of it, I need to get up in the morning. It's time to go to work. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, boom. And you just you can train yourself almost like a self-hypnotist, like you just train yourself like an animal that, like, when we know there's something we need to do and we know it's that situation where like the right thing isn't the immediately easy thing, but it's still nonetheless the right thing. It's just, okay, it's one of those situations, count down from 5 and go. And if you just can build that habit that when I get to 1, I go, then, you're going to have success. Very interesting, actually. I had this throughout most of my life. I would be like going around my life, traveling the world, living in different places, and like, see like a beautiful girl, and I might want to talk to her. But my conditioned response was like not to talk to her. And it was quite hard to break this pattern of like not taking action. And then I kind of programmed this mental strategy that was like, hey, if you don't know, you must go. So my new mental strategy was like, if I saw a girl I wanted to talk to, and I would just go and talk to her. And that's how I met my wife. I was at a party and I saw this girl and I, thought she looked very beautiful and I wanted to talk to her. But like my feet were already walking away, I was like, because I didn't, it's like, it's not the pattern is the easy thing is just to walk away and go back to standing with your friends and holding your cup or whatever. Right. But I was just kind of like, I had this idea, like, if you don't know, you must go. And I just turned on my heel and walked straight toward her. And, now she's in the other room, we've been married, been together for 4 years.
Congratulations. Yeah. I think this is really good. And I had one app on my phone a couple years ago. I don't know the name anymore, but I think it was brilliant because so you could program it on different apps that you are using. And whenever I was using Instagram, for example, they would not open the app instantly. I would have to take one deep breath before I open the app. So basically, you have it still.
Yeah, it's 1 sec.
1 sec. And I think it's amazing.
Let's show the audience. I click on Instagram on my phone, right? And it's going to go like this. Oh no, it popped up structured. So I have it integrated with another app that not only like doesn't open Instagram, but it reminds me what I'm supposed to be doing instead. So it brings up my schedule. Integration between structured and 1 sec. But if I click that I've already done the podcast, which we're recording now, and now I try to open Instagram, it's going to do it, I think. Is it going to make a liar out of me? It made a liar out of me. Anyway, it tells you to take a deep conscious breath, right?
Yeah, and I think it's somewhat of the same idea. It's whether you're counting back from 4, 3, 2, 1, or 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's the same thing. You take a deep breath and you think about, is this my limbic system to actually get some nice little gratification, or am I consciously making that choice, or am I just doom scrolling or whatever? And this way, by activating your prefrontal cortex on the front of your brain that we need for decision making, we are injecting logic. And I think this is really, really good. And it's why social media works, unfortunately, so well, and why people are depressed, doom scrolling, and not productive anymore in a modern environment. And if we then take the other route and be conscious about ourselves and take this 1 breath, or we count down from 5 to 0, we can help ourselves. And this will create a lot more productivity. On the other hand, it's a really good positive affirmation for ourselves. We just won, right? We stopped the cycle and we got it done. And all we had to do was get up and do whatever then we wanted to do. And this will create a positive streak. And that's probably why your player who went on an insane upswing was also really, really productive throughout the last couple of weeks.
I mean, he's a very intentional person. And I think one of the keys to success in anything is clearly knowing what you want and having the intention to get it. And when you know what you want, you know what work is required to get what you want, then it's just a matter of realizing those pivotal moments, those little mental battles where you can either live intentionally or be an addict to your brain chemistry. You know, most people, we're just drug addict monkeys. You know, we're addicted to Instagram. We're addicted to our phones. We're addicted to social validation. We're addicted to all these things. We're addicted to the way that things make us feel. We do the things that feel good. We don't do the things that feel bad. But if we can reprogram, like, you know, maybe addiction is not the right word. It's just we're heavily programmed, you know, it's like a computer script. And if we don't reprogram ourselves to make the required action the automatic action, like I did, then you're not going to take the required action. You know, you're going to continue to default to the strategy that will never get you the result you want. Yeah. You have to learn to default to the strategy that will get you what you want. Yeah. You know, if you struggle to get out of bed in the morning, you're going to have to find a strategy to get out of bed. You know, you're going to have to find a strategy. If you're, not happy with your health, you're going to have to find a strategy to be more active. If you're not happy with your poker results, you're going to have to find a strategy that allows you to study. And, the longer that you continue to not find an effective strategy to implement the necessary work to get the thing you want, the longer you'll be running a fool's race. You'll be on a track that will never get where you want to go.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. What I always tell is like that small action creates so much momentum that when you can get started, you will pick up the momentum. A lot of people who I start working with who have been struggling and who have been in a really bad state for a couple of weeks or months and who have been putting on weight and maybe don't feel good about themselves. Like the first week is always the week of realization. Like, this is okay, cool. You reached out to me. I start giving you a plan. There's going to be a training plan. This is what you do in the morning. And then we put on more things as we progress. The thing is, oftentimes the people then start working and they obviously realize that when they go out of bed in the morning, that just small action leads to tremendous results because they are more active throughout the day. They have more energy throughout the day. And all of the decisions, because of the small win, the small action in the morning, takes up momentum. And this is where some of the best clients come from. They start implementing it and they pick up that momentum that gets you where they want to go. And this is probably the easiest work for me if they keep on helping them in order just to keep on progressing.
I mean, one of the books that I can see on your bookshelf back there, we talked about it before the call, Atomic Habits, right? I've read this book twice, and I didn't actually realize the first time I read it, because I guess I must have been distracted, which is probably why it didn't have that much effect. But the second time I read it very carefully. I took a lot of notes. I'd actually go for a walk every morning with the dog and listen to one chapter at 15 minutes while I walk the dog, get my sunlight, and like program myself to think about my habits every day. Atomic means small. Atomic means like it's, next to subatomic. It's like the smallest particles. And their book is really about how the way that we change our behavior is by stacking these tiny wins. And high performance types fail to do that. We want the whole enchilada. We want the big goal. I want to be the next Fedor Holtz. So I can't be happy that today I did an hour in GTO Wizard because it's not enough. I'm not there yet. And the problem is we fail to give ourselves reward. Like the essential mechanism of habit is cue, stimulus, reward, right? It's like you make an obvious cue for yourself to do the thing you need to do, and then you do it. And then afterward, you feel good about doing it. And the thing that is lacking that prevents us from building good habits is we refuse to feel good if we're not already perfect. I refuse to feel good about an hour of study. It should have been 2 hours. I refuse to feel good about going to the gym because I'm not in the shape I want to be and that person over there looks better than me. I refuse to feel good about anything in my life because it could be better. Yeah. And this is that if you can't be happy with a coffee, you won't be happy with a Ferrari. Yeah. It's like if you don't fix this, nothing changes.
You know what I do when I pushed myself through a workout that was on schedule, but I didn't want to get started because I was tired? I
give yourself a big hug?
Yeah, just like, no, I give myself a high five, like, yeah, buddy. Because those are the days where I'm like really feeling good about myself. Like I wanted to do the work, and it's something that it's not something work. It's something that helps me feel good. It helps me to reach my goals, and it also has health benefits. So especially on those days when it's stressful, when I maybe had a workout the day before and I was feeling tired, just like positively reward myself with that high five. And actually, it sounds like a little bit weird, but I actually feel quite good about it. And this is where I really agree with you. A lot of people mess up. They just go into the next work block and never enjoy the process. And I think, yeah, if you start setting it up and if you start small, like obviously when you start working out, like the first time you might feel miserable, you might be super sore, but then you get up the next day again, you take a walk, and then you start the next workout, for example, you are going to pick up momentum. And I think what James Clear, like what he's very, he uses all these graphics. And I think what he does really well is that 1% better every day accumulated over 365 days, where one basically accumulates or multiplies to, 36.78 or something. Like think about it as a year, like doing meditation for 5 minutes a day. It's not like you're just having a short reward or something. It's actually something that will improve the quality of your life 1 year from now. And only think about what it does to you maybe 5 or 10 years from now. I'm also not working out to look good right now. It's just like a very nice side effect. But when I'm 60 or when I'm 70, I want to be fit. I want to still go out for a hike. I still want to bike ride. Thinking about that long term is something that I believe is very mandatory. Think about who you want to be. And if I don't work out and I never start working out again, yes, maybe in 10 years, I'm going to be obese. I will need to rely on insulin. I'm going to feel really bad. I'm not going to be a good role model. I'm not going to be able to run my business. So I'd rather start now and keep that flow going for a long time.
Yeah, there's a quote in Atomic Habits that he says, every action you take is a vote for the person that you want to be. Mm-hmm. And it reminds me of another quote from 6 Pillars of Self-Esteem, where he says, self-esteem is the reputation that you keep with yourself. Mm-hmm. When you always know. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the problems that makes it difficult for people is they have this idea of who they think they should be. Mm-hmm. And they're, missing some of the habits that would help them to be a person more similar to their goal for themselves. Mm-hmm. And as a result, they feel bad about themselves. Mm-hmm. And then if they try to start taking these little wins, right? Mm-hmm. They start, go to the gym one day, do 10 minutes on the treadmill, do something, mm-hmm. Start waking up at a sane time in the morning, start making a healthy lunch choice. Like these things, nothing changes immediately. Mm-hmm. There's no big like hoorah, like nobody cares, nobody thanks you, nobody congratulates you, and mm-hmm. nothing changes necessarily in your physical body in like the first day. Mm-hmm. So you kind of have to clap for yourself, mm-hmm. because if you the default for a lot of people is to think, who am I kidding? this isn't like, I'm not this person. And if you think you're not this person, you stay not that person. But if you can start to believe in yourself and start to believe in your future more than your past, which is hard until it's easy, then you will transform. It really is that simple. Is you have to put more of your focus on who you are becoming than who you think you are. Because to define is to limit. And if you get caught up labeling, am I good? Am I not good? Am I fit? Am I not fit? Am I, the more you try to define yourself, the more you miss the opportunity to create yourself. And I think it's a really important point to just figure out who you want to be, make a map and follow it, and don't give a shit about anything else.
Yeah, and I believe a lot of the challenges in our modern environment now come with the easy ability for us to compare with other people. It's so easy to go on social media and see, oh, this poker player is there again and he's playing high stakes. And also on the other side, this person is just like chilling at the beach and I'm here working with myself. But what it's really about is looking at where you started from and where you are right now and also where you want to be. That's the only comparison that we want to make. So maybe if I started working out 1 month ago and I look back 1 month, like nothing much has changed. Maybe I'm already starting to feel some of the benefits, but I know because I trust in the science and maybe in the plan that I'm starting to work on, that I'm going to be successful. I think this is what a lot of players miss out and focus on. This comparison is really something that we see also in society outside of poker is making people really, really depressed. Like we see young girls scrolling social media and the levels of depression, for example, because they constantly see these role models on social media. People and young children, for example, are becoming very depressed. So the goal is to calm down, get back to yourself, and also be happy with where you started, where you are right now, and also think about where you want to go.
Yeah. I mean, they say that comparison is the thief of joy. And I think that's, it's interesting how available comparison is to people, and they don't realize it, like a guy opens his phone, maybe follows a lot of girls and then he's immediately like comparing them to like whatever person he's with and feeling bad about his partner. And then, his attitude toward her is different. And he doesn't realize he played himself. He made himself less satisfied in his life. It's very easy for people to, open their phone and like see things and be triggered in a negative way. And it is possible though, to reframe these things, it is possible to see someone who has the results you want and feel that it's evidence that like what one person can do, another person can do, and it's possible for you as well. And it's really just about the person's kind of like energy and attitude, like if you can reframe other people as inspiration rather than competition, then it can be healthy for you. But if you can't, then it's unhealthy for you. And I think it's very important. Like we're not going to be able to change. I mean, we're not going to get into politics and petition Instagram to change their algorithm. So we're not going to change the way Instagram works. So we need to change ourselves, which either means changing our habits around how we use it. Like, do we use it at all? Or just our habits about how we perceive it. And I think that's one of the challenges is that most people are actively every day waking up, trying to make tangible changes in the world outside of themselves. But they may not even know there is an entire body of work to be done in the other direction in terms of adjusting yourself. If you can't change the things around you, you're forced to change yourself, and like being able to change how you feel about the things in your environment. I was listening to like a pretty amazing book today. It's a Tim Ferriss recommendation that's been on my list forever. Anthony DeMello's Awareness. And he's talking about how like there's a point in your life where if you become equanimous enough, you'll like seek out the people that used to annoy you that you couldn't stand to be around to like see and be like, it doesn't bother me anymore. Like, see, like, this person can be like this. I just don't care. It's kind of like, it's hilarious the level that you can get to and your ability to be fine with things when you stop trying to change the things around you and just take responsibility for your own perception. And like, I think that it's a whole body of work that gets overlooked. And if you can spend more time on this kind of contemplation, like how do I want to live? How do I want to react to the stimulus of the world? And it's kind of the opposite of being unconscious, just living in that state of chronic stress, drinking 7 coffees a day, bit to bit to bit, reacting to everything around us. Like this is being asleep. And when we kind of wake up to being the being capable of adjusting how we absorb the energy around us, and kind of taking responsibility for what we do with the circumstances of our life, doors start to open. Joy is found where it wasn't joy before. Stress may happen, but it's not as debilitating. It's like, it's something you observe, and it's something that's just a part of life. It's like stress, and so what? Like, yeah, there's stress. This thing happened. It sucks. A lot of people were stressed when FTX went down. Things in life, they happen. They suck. What is being stressed going to help about it? So, on we go.
I really liked it. I went on vacation with my girlfriend. It's been 3 years ago or something, and I lost the key to my car. Like we had to go to the car. I had 2 keys with me, and one of them I lost. And during the time, I was meditating a lot, and my girlfriend was upset, obviously, because I lost the key. But on the other hand, she was like, "Simon, why are you not upset? What? How does it help me if I'm being upset now? If I'm getting angry at myself? There's no difference, right? The key is still gone. It doesn't make any sense to be angry now." And I think this is where a lot of the benefits of mindfulness practice come in later on, because between the stimulus and your response, you become aware that there is a break in which you can decide how you want to respond. And this break...
You're quoting Viktor Frankl to me right now?
I don't know who the guy is, but if he said
Viktor Frankl.
Yeah.
You've never read Man's Search for Meaning?
No, but I know
you're leaving this podcast with homework.
Okay. Yeah,
All of you.
Yeah, okay. you have to send me a reading list. I'm sorry for that. But I think it's a very powerful quote. And I haven't learned it until my mid-20s, and I'm 31 now. I learned it through mindfulness and meditation. I used to be very reactive and get really angry at times. And I just learned that it doesn't make sense if I'm being in a bad emotional state. Of course, things still upset me, but it's not in the way that it was like 10 years ago. And I think that's where a lot of people need that time. And I think this is maybe where we started from, with being in a constant state of stress. This is where a lot of the enjoyment and the fulfillment in lives come from, just being aware and having the time to take a break, and also be super conscious about what's going on around you, and also observing yourself reacting to something and then consciously changing it.
I think it's my turn to say I couldn't agree more.
Sorry, I said it a lot this time, but there was some synergy. It's all good.
I mean, for those of you guys who haven't read Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, that's where this idea comes from. He talks about, like, just as Simon was saying, when something happens in our environment, the stimulus, there's a response, and until we make it conscious, it's happening automatically. But like, the freedom that no one can take from you is this ability to choose our response in a given set of circumstances. And like, I've expanded on this topic in a lot of different places. So I'll kind of just invite you guys to have a listen of the book and the story. It's 4 hours by audiobook, and it'll change your life. It's every time I went through a hard time in my life, I would read that book and maybe read it twice. I probably read it 4 times, and it's just a profound book about your personal power. It really shows you how you can choose the attitude you take in the world and the way that you're going to live, despite what's going on around you. And I think it's an essential lesson. It would be such a mistake to go through life and never seize that power, to live your life and always be allowing the events to make you mad. The Stoics teach this, right? Don't give any care to the events, because the events don't care. Like, variance doesn't give a shit that you're having a bad day. Poker doesn't care. Poker has no sympathy for you. Poker doesn't give a shit. So if every day that you lose in poker, you get upset, well, you're going to be upset a lot, because you're going to lose 45% of the time, even if you're a winner. So I don't know, it seems like a pretty bad strategy when it's like completely within the realm of possibility to not be so upset, to be someone who can just, shrug and that it is what it is. The events don't care. So you might as well not care as well. Sounds really good. Well, I think we've reached a moment in the conversation where I feel like we've given everyone a homework assignment. So I guess that means that the session is coming to a close. What do you want to say for the people? Actually, I have a question I'd like to ask everybody at the end of the session. So I'm gonna leave you with this. I'm gonna let you tell the audience a little bit more about you, where to find you. But first, you have to get through my question, and that is, if this was your last chance, which it's not, but if it was your last chance to talk to our fine listeners today, and you wanted to give them 3 messages, pieces of advice, like something, you had 3 things you could tell them. Like, these are Simon, like put these on my tombstone. These are the important things. What would your 3 things be?
That's a tough question, man. I think the first thing...
Should have given it to you in advance.
No, that's all right. The problem is, James, I really can't count up to 3, so you have to stop me at some point. I think the first thing is take some time, become aware of the processes you've been going through throughout the last couple of weeks or month. And if a lot of the stuff that we were talking about today, you resonated with for some time today, I think it's a good time to take a break, go outside in nature, maybe take a piece of paper or a small amount of book and think about the stuff that you would like to change in your life. So it's getting a little bit philosophical for a sports scientist who has a background in sports science. But what I truly believe is awareness brings the ability to make change. So this is probably the first thing. The second thing is, we only have that one life. We only have that one body. And if you are in your 20s or maybe in your 30s or your 40s, and I think in your 20s, everything usually runs pretty great. There's probably no big thing that happens when it comes to health. But the time you are investing now in your body and in the health of your mind is going to yield big returns when it comes to you getting into your 50s, 60s, and 70s. And the way that chronic disease is on the rise throughout the last couple of years, we clearly see that it's part of our society and because of our lifestyle. So start changing things around if you're seeing now that it's not going into the right direction. If there's no movement, if there's unhealthy nutrition, if there's negative behavior, become conscious about it and go for some change. The third thing is, I don't know, I think I talked too much already, so maybe just give your mom a call or your dad a call and tell them that you love them. So I think that's it. That's how we're closing.
And that might be the most important one, right? Very easy to get lost in high performance and forget the things that truly matter. So thank you very much for that. That was a great summation. I love the thing you said about awareness as well, because I think it's very true that, awareness is the answer. It's the key. It's the thing that lets you see, here's what's happening. And then it gives you the opportunity to realize the moment in which you can start to make those incremental tiny changes where a different thing can start to happen. And I think it's the Carl Jung quote where he says, until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our life and we'll call it fate. So definitely on the same page there. And it's very interesting. One of the things I've heard from personal trainers before is like people who are in the physical exercise field is that when you're helping people with their body composition, you're always a mindset coach as well. So I feel like you might have sold yourself short a little bit. I mean, I personally, if I'm looking for someone to work with about my health and nutrition, I want them to be on the kind of like on the more conscious path. I want them to understand the link between the mind and the body. So I think it's great that, as someone who takes, has a degree in exercise science, and I might have misquoted that, but you know what I mean? Like someone who also comes in with a background in mindfulness and a background in understanding the connection between the two. Maybe you can fix my words on that.
Exercise science is one part of sports science. So within within sports science, there's exercise science, there is biomechanics, and there's multiple things. So sports science tries to do it all, but training science was part of my master's degree. So the master thesis I read was about, this is actually quite funny. My master thesis was about monitoring and managing training and recovery in semi-professional basketball players. So maybe even if I did it for basketball players and we talked a lot about stress management or management of yourself today, I think this is a good one to quote it with. And sports science is amazing. I think training and movement is an amazing, and we said in the beginning, such an underrated tool, but it's not your one pill for health. It has to be awareness, mindfulness, it has to be nutrition, it has to be your social life, it has to be sleep. Like it's multifold, right? You can't solve a bad diet that is full of sugar with just going to the gym. You won't be able to make it. That's why I try to get in as much information as possible from other experts as well, and try to implement that into my coaching.
I mean, a lack of care for nutrition, for exercise, for sleep, for recovery, for all these things that's a bad mindset. It's impossible to say you have a good mindset if you're not looking after the body that holds the mind, So I think it's kind of impossible to separate one from the other. And as we said, you can waste a lot of time when you focus on one and neglect the other.
Yeah, I highly agree. And what you said in the beginning, like all of these people are looking for these small tweaks and tricks, but in the end comes down, look at all of these areas that make a difference on your health and performance. Start with the thing that have the biggest impact. Go outdoors, start eating some vegetables, meditate for 5 minutes a day, and be aware of your biorhythm, and have one day where you are in nature and can be social. And then once you have this figured out, once you figure the basics out, that's when we can start building a training plan and a nutrition strategy and talk about a ketogenic state. But this is where the details are. The biggest things come from the basics.
So how do you help people with that specifically? Like somebody comes in, they want to optimize their performance, like I did. And when we started working together, how do you tell the listeners a little bit about how you can break that down for them, how you can help them, and where to find you if they curious about learning more about that?
Yes. So what I do in the beginning, I usually send out a questionnaire, first of all, before the first session, to learn more about their lifestyle. Or within the first session is going to be a lot of asking. I need to understand what kind of lifestyle this person has and what kind of things we want to optimize first. And then I look at their nutrition, I look at how they work out or how they don't work out, what kind of issues and maybe symptoms they also have that might be a sign of disease, like some blood sugar dysregulation because they have lack of energy throughout the day, for example. And then I come up with a plan, I come up with an idea and an individual strategy to help them get into a better state of better health, which will then translate to better performance. And I start exactly where I just told you. I start with the basics. I set them up with a training plan that picks them up where they are right now, that gets them a little bit further, that can later on be advanced. And I start with the basics in terms of nutrition. If they are on a really bad diet, for example, well, we start with some more of the basics. If they are already conscious about their health and what they eat, okay, we can start doing some biohacking, thinking about the ketogenic state, and so on and so on. And this first session usually is around 60 to 90 minutes, depending on how much information I need. And what I also do in that session is a lot of deep learning. As I have a background in sports science, I like to explain stuff. And I also think deep learning is a big part of making people do things, because once they understand how the take-up of energy on the brain from the blood-brain barrier works, they understand why cravings become present. And then they can also learn how they can solve them, for example. And in the process, they learn something that they can also forward to their family and their friends. So deep learning is part of the process. And what actually happens then, I'm there for them. I do a lot of support when people have challenges. I can give feedbacks on the technique when they're training, when they're doing a squat, when they're doing a deadlift, for example. And then we check in every 2 weeks and see what's been going well, what's been going not so well. And we think about how we can optimize it in order to make that progress pretty steady and make people advance. And I think what is a big challenge for a lot of players, and also what you've maybe experienced during WCOOP right now, is like when the series is running, there's always maintenance mode. And then we have to think about setting more realistic goals. Maybe then 5 times a week of training is not the thing anymore. Maybe it's 3 times a week and doing 2 walks. And then also, just what I want to say is like adapting the plan based on what is being put on you. I think that is something really important. Like, this is not where we make big progress in the gym. This is where the gym helps us to be more balanced and have more energy when we're playing the big WCOOP, for example.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things that came to mind for me from the work that we did together is like, I think it's important to let the people know the process is fun and it helps you stay accountable when you have somebody that you're kind of going through it with. It's easy to in your mind think you're going to make a change, but you haven't like made it really firm. Your intention is not that clear. But when you start a program with a professional and you have somebody kind of holding you to task, it's much easier to follow through on your intention. And the work that you put in when you're not in a series, when you're in a time where you're can devote your priority to your health and your nutrition, it makes you a more resilient, more energetic person for when the big tasks come on. And, to be honest, it's quite fun and quite enjoyable to improve your energy levels, to wake up and feel better, to look in the mirror and see that you're, looking in better shape than you have been, especially if things have been trending in a not the direction that you want for quite some time. And then when you start to make progress and really feel good about the way you look, it's like, it's a very pleasant experience to start to feel those things trending in the right direction. So I definitely, I think a lot of poker players probably don't feel that they can find a way to reach their physical performance goals while having the workload of a poker player. And I think there's no one who knows better that you can and understands how than perhaps Simon. So yeah, I'd recommend you guys to reach out to him if that sounds like something that you're interested in. And where can our guys do that? We'll put it in the show notes. But if guys want to work with you, if they want to have a consultation, like how can they contact you?
Yeah. First of all, thank you very much for the kind words and also for the invitation today. I started building my Instagram, so you can go to Performance Coach Simon. You can find me there, or go to my website, performance-coach-simon.de, because I'm in German, as you probably heard. And yeah, that's how to find me. You can also send me a friend request on Discord. That's Simon S. Not the way it's usually written, SEIMN 92. So you can reach out there as well. And yeah, if you feel like might be a good fit, I'm happy to help. Like, first of all, I started working with people in the medical center where I worked in rehabilitation. And why I do my work is because I want to give something to other people. I think this is really important to mention. And I always feel really pleased when I see people making progress, becoming happier with their life, and feeling more balanced and happier with their well-being. So this is why I went into self-employment, because it also gave me a better chance to achieve exactly that. And one more time, James, thank you very much for having me today.
You're very welcome. All right, guys, until next time, Ate Logo from Brazil, and ciao, Simon. Thank you for coming on the podcast. See you guys.